There we go. Listen to Disney movie, ready to judge Zelda. That's the right way to be. Sitting down and ready for the hot takes. Okay, so what I'm going to say is I don't think there are going to be any hot takes, but like what I do want to say is I'm going to try my best, and this is kind of futile really at the end of the day, but I want to judge them in a vacuum. And by that what I mean is that I want to judge them based on their merit as a game rather than how I feel about them subjectively in terms of like nostalgia and stuff like that, okay? And um so for example, I'm not judging them based on what my favorite is, or what one I enjoy playing the most necessarily, although those things will usually be like mutually inclusive, with them being a really good game. I'm going to like try my best to I'm going to like try my best to like judge them based on like their own merit, if you get what I mean. And to be honest, that's not always like a that's not always something that's possible. There's always a certain amount of subjectivity because we're human beings, but I'm going to do my best. So, where this starts is I need to find Triforce Heroes and I need to push it into the never played thing. So if I can find where that is, I don't think they even included it, did they? I think they, no, here it is. So I'll put that into never played. Now, which one of these is the Game Boy Advance one, and which one of these is the GameCube one? This is the Game Boy Advance one. I've never played that Game Boy Advance Link to the Past Four Swords game. All of the rest of these I have played. Second to last. What is second to last? the all of the rest of these I have played, but these two I have not, so I don't think it's fair to like judge them. So they're gonna go in there. So the, oh, it was second to last in the list. You were helping me. Okay. I appreciate that. So like, where should I start? Should I start like low? Should I start at the top? Should I start in the middle? I think I'm going to like start at the top because I think that's the easiest place for me to start, right? And for me, I've talked about this during the Let's Play, but for me, when I look at it in a vacuum, based on its own merit, like as a game and as a Zelda game, I think like Twilight Princess is the best one. Like, and again, I don't mean that it's my favorite one. I think that it's like, there is nothing that I would really change about this game. I think it has like a really good story. It has really good characters. Its boss battles, there's only one boss battle in that game that's less than amazing, right? And that's the spider one in the Temple of Time. All the rest of the boss battles in that game have great music, are extremely fun, are imaginative, get you to use the dungeon item, and the dungeons in this game, all of them are great. There are no like games that are oh, I could do that as well. I could reorganize them by my favorites. That would be interesting. But we'd have fewer tiers because like a lot of them would just go into meh, if I organized them by my favorites. Well, not a lot of them, but so like Twilight Princess, the dungeons in it are really good. All of them, like there is without exception, all of the dungeons are great. The items are fun. That's something that I talked about during the Let's Play as well. I think it's important for items in a Zelda game to just be fun to use. And all of the items in Twilight Princess are fun to use. You have the arrows, which are fun because they're accurate. But they're also fun because you have stuff like the bomb arrows and you have the Hawkeye, depending on what way you want to play, so you can get somewhat imaginative as well. The ball and chain is extremely fun to use, the spinner is fun to use, the claw shot is already fun to use, and then it becomes even more fun when you get the second one. Just the visual style of the game is cool. It has this very sort of muted, dour, somber sort of atmosphere about it. it's just like an all round brilliant Zelda game, and I would struggle to find something to quibble about with it. Like I can't think of something that I would change about it or that I find subpar about it. I think and it just like it just like meets all expectations and exceeds them. Like, it's funny that I'm sitting here saying this because I remember there was a time when I was young and foolish where I didn't appreciate this game as much as I did, but like now after let's playing it again, and I feel like the HD version, and maybe that's something that I should say as well. I'm going to conflate the HD version and the original for the purpose of this, just like with Link's Awakening. I'll conflate the remake and the original, but I feel like the HD remaster just like tweaked some things and made it even more fun, you know. So like Twilight Princess, like I think it's a fantastic game. It's the best Zelda game. In all round, there's nothing that I would like to be different about it. I think it's just top. It deserves to be Pipit tier. It's really really good. So that's Twilight Princess. That's like where we start. Okay. Um, Down in like the all right tier, I'm going to put. I think it's like low hanging fruit, but I'm going to put like Zelda 2 down in the I'm going to put like Zelda 2 down in the all right tier. I don't feel as strongly about this game as a lot of people think they do, and by a lot of people think they do, I mean that most people who diss this game have never played it, and a lot of other people who diss this game have never bothered trying to get good at it. Um, and therefore like they don't give themselves the chance to like it, is what I'm going to say about Zelda 2. I think Zelda 2 is one of those games where it's the learning curve is extremely steep, but it's one of those games where once you get good at it, yeah, it's one of those games where once you get good at it, but it takes a certain amount of time, it's extremely fun and it's extremely enjoyable. Um, it's just not anywhere. It hasn't aged very well, and it's not anywhere in the same tier as the other ones. Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest. Simon's Quest is Simon's Quest I love. I really like Simon's Quest. I've actually LP'd Simon's Quest on my on my channel. And that's another game that I will defend. But I actually really like it. So like Zelda 2, as I say, I feel like it doesn't I feel like a lot of people just have never played it, and that automatically translates into it's not good. Um, but I think what it is it's just an old school game, and you need to learn how to be good at it before you can enjoy it to a certain extent. And whether you want to do that or not is up to you, you know. And I think that's fine. But I'm gonna put it in all right tier, to be honest. It's like the bottom tier in terms of Zelda main series games. Which is not a bad place to be, you know, because they're all of a certain standard or a certain caliber. Um, oh, the tier list is posted in tier list is posted there. Oh God, that's good. I like it. Well, you've played three of the best. Let me put it that way. Nothing to be ashamed of there. Just looking at Fury's tier list. So where do we go from here? So we've got our top and our bottom of our spectrum sorted out, which is kind of a good place to be. Where I'm going to go from here is I'm going to go with Four Swords Adventures. I'm also going to put into the all right tier. I feel like this game, there's a certain like gimmicky nature to it, where it's there's a certain gimmicky nature to it which makes it fun in a novelty sort of way. But like it's kind of it's made less fun by the fact that I need to have my two Game Boy Advances or my Game Boy Advance and my cable and find them, and have that charged and plug it in, and really you need to have more than one player in order to enjoy playing it, and then it's fun, but it's just not great that that you have to go through all of that crap just to play it. So on top of it, it's a good game, but I feel like it's almost like it's almost like a spin-off to Minish Cap, which it is, in essence. But it's just not very memorable or great to me, and the sort of the price of entry kind of is prohibitive to a certain extent. So that's what lands it in all right tier. Um. Okay. So where do I go? It's hard. Like Wind Waker, I'm going to put into great tier, and like this is where the sort of this is my attempt at being objective, because Wind Waker has been like one of my favorite games for a long time. Like this game is such a huge part of my childhood, by childhood I mean when I was like 13, 14, 15. The GameCube era was kind of like my was like extremely important to me in terms of me and video my relationship to video games as media. And Wind Waker, there's something so warm and sort of bright about it. The art style is really cool, the music is really cool. I think that I think that it's very easy for like nostalgia then to cloud your vision about Wind Waker to a certain extent. I think when you compare it to Twilight Princess, the dungeons aren't as good. The bosses are good. The bosses are still great. But like the dungeons aren't as good, and like the story to a certain extent, it's there in the same way the story is there in Ocarina of Time. Whereas I think Twilight Princess tried to like push a few more boundaries in terms of making the story have at least a certain amount more complexity and interest about it. So Wind Waker, even though like it's a game that I love, I don't think it's quite in Pipit tier. I think it's in Great tier, which is a good place, very good place to be as far as being a Zelda game is concerned. Um, I'm going to deal with Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons next. And this is where, like, again, I'm going to be, and the reason I'm doing so is to be objective as well. Like, for me, these two swap around in terms of what's my favorite and what's like the best. Um, and like for me, Oracle of Ages is the better game. It fairly lands in great tier, and Oracle of Seasons is a good game. Oracle of Seasons is the one that has like the more has like a like lives rent free in my nostalgic view of my childhood. Like when I think of like the hours I've spent playing Oracle of Seasons when I was a child, it was just such an important game to me. I remember buying it. I remember the cardboard box. I remember the color of it. I remember how excited I was. I remember playing it on my purple translucent Game Boy Color. It has great dungeons. Like it has fantastic dungeons, like all the handheld Zelda games. Um, it's a fantastic game. However, Oracle of Ages, which I played later after Seasons when I had got a bit older, Oracle of Ages has the amazing dungeons and puzzles and everything that Seasons has as well. But Oracle of Ages also has like better villains and more of a feeling of a story happening. And like Oracle of Ages just has a different atmosphere. Like there's just a little bit more polish on Ages to Seasons in terms of the world building. It's just better. So even though like for me, Oracle of Seasons is more important to me, Oracle of Ages is a better game. It's like it definitely deserves to be on the same level as Wind Waker because it's so great. Yes, also Seasons has Moosh, and Ricky the boxing kangaroo. So, you know, that wins at points in the love category. So, I'm trying to think now. Where do we go from here? I think Minish Cap belongs in the great tier as well. Like, Minish Cap is a fantastic game. Again, I love the art style of it. I love the way that the story is set up. I like that it doesn't go like. I like Vati as a villain. I think Vati is cool, and then there's like the whole like play between the play between Vati as a villain and Eslo or Elzo or whichever the hat. Um, the dungeons in it are extremely fun. The bosses in it are fun. It's just a fantastic game. Like I think like Minish Cap is just an all round amazing handheld Zelda game. I think it's just really, really great. So that's why it belongs in the same level as Oracle of Ages and Wind Waker. I'm going to go to Link Between Worlds next. Link Between Worlds I'm going to put into good. Link Between Worlds, I think Cadence of Hyrule count as it? It does. I've never played it, but I think it counts as like a spin-off in the same way that like Age of Calamity or Tingle's Rose-Picked Rupee Land or whatever. But I've never actually played it. I know it's like the Zelda edition of Crypt of the Necrodancer, isn't it? I've seen people playing that and I've been astounded by it. Like it's one of those games where when people are good at it, I'm just like, how is your brain processing all of that at the same time? It's astounding to me. But no, it's not on this one. Also, hi Kyle, it's great to see you. Link Between Worlds, the reason why Link Between Worlds isn't good is because it's a good game, right? It's really fun. I loved the. I liked that it really emphasized that you could kind of take the dungeons in whichever order you wanted them to, or wanted to take them. I really like Ravio as a character, and I like Lorule, and I like Hilda, and I like all of that stuff that's going on, right? I love the puzzles that they build around going 2-dimensional onto the wall and going in swapping between like Hyrule and Lorule. The dungeons are really fun in it. There's a certain amount of challenge to the combat in it. What kind of I don't like about it, and again, this is like you can compare Minish Cap and Link Between Worlds, I think, very effectively, is that like Link Between Worlds, the villain is extremely irrelevant to me. Like that weird Ganondorf looking person, they have like the weird red hair. I love the Maya Mai. Like the Maya Mai I think are great, and I love the treasure hunting aspect of finding the Maya Mai. The villain is very like boring and irrelevant. I feel like if they had accentuated Hilda more as a character and the whole Hyrule Low Rule thing, it would have been more fun, because that kind of seems to just come out of the blue further towards the end, you know? But like, I can't even remember the villain's name. That's how like boring they are. And they do nothing to do with the story. In that way, it's like very similar to Oracle of Seasons, where Onyx is kind of irrelevant for the entirety of the game until like you see him again at the end and beat him. And that's kind of like the way the villain is in Link Between Worlds as well. So it's a good game, but it's just missing that certain amount of like polish. Not polish, because it is very well presented, but it's missing like that extra little push that makes it great. You know, I think it's still a fun game. Yeah, the villains, like, that's one thing that I feel like Twilight Princess has done extremely well. Like Twilight Princess, you had Zant as a villain, and you had and you had Ganondorf, you know, and Ganondorf for the longest time is this sort of strange, shadowy presence that you haven't identified yet. So you kind of know that Zant isn't the main villain, you know, but even so, Zant is really cool, and he shows up like periodically throughout the game. You kind of feel that he's there the whole time. I think like Twilight Princess has done like the best job in terms of there being like a present villain who's relevant throughout the game. Um, so the Ganondorf was pretty anticlimactic. I thought Ganondorf was cool. Like I think like he it says like it's scrolling. I thought Ganondorf was cool. Like again, I think I don't think like Zant was like worthy of being like the main villain. I think it was I like the way that they built Ganondorf into the story, showing like that they'd failed to execute him correctly. So then they just decided to banish him to the Twilight Realm. I like the kind of knock-on effect that has on Midna and Midna's kingdom. I like how then Ganon is like a corrupting force in the Twilight Realm and uses Zant just to get out of there, and to resurrect himself. I think it's good. Like I think Twilight Princess has done like the best job in terms of like the villain being relevant during the game. Um Except like Majora's Mask probably does it even better to a certain extent. Like Majora's Mask probably does the best job at that out of all of them. Um so where do we go from here? Link to the Past, I'm going to put like on the same level as Link is good. Link to the Past, I feel, is a game that a lot of people like revere. So it's hard for me to just put it on the level of good. But again, I think it's just like it's an all round it's kind of like a good Zelda game. Again, it doesn't blow the doors off. I think the dungeons are fun. I think the music is fun. I think the villains are very passe. Like I think Aghanim, it's very hard to invest yourself in Aghanim, and then like Ganon just shows up and you're like, oh yeah, it's Ganon. Like it's like whatever, all right. So yeah, I think Link to the Past and Link Between Worlds and Oracle of Seasons, they're very much like, in terms of the spectrum of Zelda games ranging from good to amazing. They're very much kind of they're just good games. Um, Link's Awakening, I'm going to put onto Pipit tier. I think if like Twilight Princess is the Pipit tier 3D Zelda, I think Link's Awakening is the Pipit tier 2-dimensional Zelda. Yes, the medallions were cool. I thought that was something that was good, and they've never really done something like that again, to be honest. I think the closest thing they've done is the masks in Majora's Mask, in terms of having so many different sort of abilities that give other effects. But yeah, the I think like Link's Awakening, and I'm including the remake in this because the remake is fantastic. The like I think it's the greatest 2D Zelda game. Um, like by a long shot. I think there's such a unique atmosphere to that game. It's so indescribable. Like there's like indescribable is the right word because I don't even know how to start. Like it really does feel like you're in this sort of dream world, in that when you're like having a dream, you feel like stuff is happening and you don't have any sort of agency. You feel like you are a character in a film and it's just kind of the narrative is going on and you're going with it. And somehow, like in Link's Awakening, they managed to do the same thing. Like you just feel like there's this like bigger world happening outside, that and somehow you're after becoming part of this smaller world inside or something. It's very strange to describe, but it's so effective. And then it's like every element of it, like the sort of enigmatic characters, the strange things that people say, the kind of odd messages that you get hinting at, like how like the world is like how you're going to end up destroying the world almost, if you know what I mean, because the world is a dream world. It's just very kind of like almost like it approaches high concept when you start like picking it apart in terms of anything that another Zelda game would do. almost like Majora's Mask does as well. Like, and then like you have the music that goes along with it. Like the music in Link's Awakening is fantastic. Like the whatever the face dungeon or whatever it's called is so good. Like the music there, it's just like so, and the way that builds up is just breathtaking. It's like one of my favorite tracks in any Zelda game of all time. The yeah, and the other like Nintendo games, like there's like the Chain Chomp, there's Warsh appears out of like Mario Brothers 2. It's just strange. There's something like strange about this world, but you kind of accept it as being normal, the same way that that's what happens in a dream as well. And you have like these odd little scenes, like the scene where you're on the beach with Marin, and it's just there's something weird about it. It's almost like it feels almost the same way as like in like Superstar Saga. You feel like you're in a Mario game, but you're not, you know? And like Link's Awakening is the same thing. You feel like you're in the same world as something like Zelda 1, but you also feel like you're not. There's something off about it, and you can't quite put your finger on it. And that's like something that's so important is like the atmosphere. And then like you just layer the amazing fun gameplay on it, the puzzles as well. Like the dungeons in the 2D Zelda games are just usually off the charts anyway, you know, in the handhelds. But like some of like the dungeons in Link's Awakening, they can put you through your paces, you know. It's just a great game. Like I think it's definitely the a Pipit level. Skyward Sword I'm going to address now, and I'm going to like I think I'm going to disregard the Wii version to an extent, because if it had only been the Wii version, I would have had to add this game is bad tier, and I would have put Skyward Sword into it, and it would have been there all on its own, unloved by anybody in the this game is bad tier, and I would not have cared. But the the new version, the HD version on Switch, like what I feel about it now is that I feel like the way it feels playing the game now with the new HD version when you're playing with the motion controls is almost like the way the developers that when they made it wanted it to feel. And I think that's kind of where my whole like dissonance with that game kind of came from originally, is that I felt like the developers wanted me to feel like it played a certain way when it very obviously didn't. Whereas now, and that's just the controls, you know, it just wasn't fun to play from a controls point of view, and from in terms of executing anything in the game. And then you just had like the way that Fi drags everything on top of it. You know, you have the all of the small little things that like add up to make an already annoying to play game even more annoying. Like the like how like picking up everything, you get interrupted every single time, to the extent where I'd be like, I'm just going to avoid picking that up because I don't want to go sit through me reading about it, you know? So like everything about that game used to annoy, like it just felt like it was conspiring to make me not enjoy it. But the HD version fixes a lot of that. Like I find I'm actually able to enjoy her as a character now, playing it now on stream. The controls, I feel like the controls are actually fun now. Like I don't it like the controls feel natural. I stop thinking about them when I'm playing the game now on Switch. Um, and I'm able to enjoy the gameplay, I'm able to enjoy the dungeons, and I'm able to enjoy the story. And I agree with you in the chat. Even despite that, now I'm still going to put it in like alright tier, because am I going to put it in alright or am I going to put it in good? I still don't think that it's like a great game. I find like the combat kind of leaves a lot to be desired, you know. I find like the combat feels like it's just there rather than really being an important element of the game. I find like when you're in the sky, a lot of it is just like a couple of rocks around, and then you're just in this giant fart cloud for the rest of the time. Um, I just, I don't know, I find like there's a lot of, I find it a little bit insulting to a certain extent that you go to the same area each time in order to do main elements of the game. And what I mean by that is that you go to the forest place, you go to the fireplace, you go to the sand place, and you do the foresty dungeon, you do the fire dungeon, and you do the sand dungeon where you turn time backwards and forwards. Then you go to the forest place and there's water there now. Um, and then you do the amazing cistern dungeon, which I really love the atmosphere of. Like, that's a fantastic dungeon. Then you go to the fireplace again and you do like another fire dungeon. And then you go to the sand place again and you do another dungeon where you turn time backwards and forwards. And then there's also this other boss that you fight like 10 times, this like black thing with the weird toes. And there's also like this other guy that shows up that you fight twice, where it's not a fun boss battle, and where I don't really care about him as a villain either. So like all of that stuff, even though I feel like I'm able to enjoy the story and the other characters more now, I'm able to enjoy playing the game more now, there's an awful lot of substance that's not there. Yeah, I think like you're exactly right, Austin, as well. It's just like there's I don't think you're missing a lot more. You know, I don't think you're missing a lot more by not having played it more, because that there's a certain amount of kind of lack of care. You know, when you look at like when you look at other Zelda games that are here on this board, you know, there's just a certain amount of kind of lack of panache about it, if you know what I mean. Where like, I don't know, it's just, it's still it's all right, you know. So I'm able to judge it now as being an all right game, and I'm enjoying playing it. But I'm not sure that I'll ever bother going back to play it again afterwards, you know, or even this time I'm not going to bother 100%ing it. I'm just going to play it and enjoy it, you know. So that's kind of where I'm at with Skyward Sword now, objectively. So, and I like that I'm kind of able to look at it there that way now, you know, and change my opinion about it to a certain extent, and be able to like evaluate it for what it is rather than evaluating it for what I don't like, if you know what I mean. So where are we at now? I feel like the ones that are left, Zelda 1, I'm going to call like a great game. I think Zelda 1 is like Minish Cap, where it's just a rootin' tootin' Zelda game. Like, it's where it all started, obviously, but it's also still fun to play. I think Zelda 1 is a game that has just aged well. It's timeless in like the same way that Super Metroid is timeless, that you can just like play it over and over again and still have fun doing it, you know. It still has a certain amount of challenge to it. Some of the dungeons are not easy, you know. It's also not completely obtuse, though. You can find your way around there, you know. Um, it's just a great game, and it's just fun to play. And I think it definitely deserves to be on the same level as like Oracle of Ages, Minish Cap, and Wind Waker. You know, it's just good. What more can I say? Um, Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks are like hard ones for me to place. Phantom Hourglass I'm going to go ahead and put on the good tier, because Phantom Hourglass I feel is very fun to play. You have to play it on the DS, really. I've tried playing it on the Wii U Virtual Console. It doesn't feel the same. Um, I think it controls well. using the items is fun. I love drawing with the stylus. I love the dungeons. I like the bosses are kind of, even the bosses themselves are like puzzles sometimes, you know. Um, I don't like the way that the Ocean King temple thing is executed. I don't find it fun having to backtrack through the whole thing. Um, it's just not very enjoyable, you know. Um, and the like it the it I think it's that you have to do the same things multiple times is what I don't like about it. Because I don't see the rationale behind that. If that was taken out of the game and you could just like continue where you left off to a certain extent, I think that would be fun. Or if there were more shortcuts, they do build in some shortcuts to based on like other items that you're after finding during the course of playing the game, but they're not really very significant. You still end up having to stealth your way around, and you have a time limit, and you have to manage your sand and your hourglass, and that just makes it not fun. It feels like a chore to a certain extent, which I don't like it when things feel like a chore. That being said, it's still a really good game and it's fun to play. I love Linebeck as a character, like as this kind of like sarky kind of guy who doesn't give you any respect, you know. Um, I also think it's just fun to play in terms of drawing your course with the boat and course correcting and mapping out where you're going to go. It's definitely feels like a DS game where they wanted to utilize the touchscreen to its fullest potential, and I think it's a good game. But the one thing I wonder about like Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks is how will they ever kind of, and a lot of DS games are like that, aren't they? Is like they're so touch screen orientated that how will they ever be replicated in future iterations or future consoles or whatever, you know. I think we already saw that with The World Ends With You, where when they released like the remaster on the Switch, it's not fun to play without the touch controls. So you know, for Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, I'm still interested in seeing like how will they translate if they do re-release them at some point. How will they translate into future games or whatever? Link Between Worlds doesn't have that issue because it's not like a stylus based game like these ones are, you know. So that there's ways to go around that. Spirit Tracks, Spirit Tracks, I think it fixes a lot of stuff that goes down that's not great about Phantom Hourglass. So it fixes the Temple of the Ocean King in that now you just kind of go to the next level up in the tower instead of having to go through the whole crap all over again. Um, the roll feels better in Spirit Tracks. So it's easier to execute that as well. The panpipes are fun, the characters are fun, the dungeons are fun. Um, I still don't think it's better enough to be in great tier with the likes of Oracle of Ages, Minish Cap, and stuff like that. But I still think it's better than Phantom Hourglass, so it's like high good tier, I think, is where I'd put Spirit Tracks. Um, so now we have these three. I've been saving these for last because in one way they're like the hardest ones for me to place to a certain extent. Um, I'm going to put Ocarina of Time in great tier. I know a lot of people will be like, so you think Link's Awakening is better than Ocarina of Time? And I'm like, yeah, to a certain extent I do. Like Ocarina of Time is a great game. I think it's almost like Wind Waker in that it's very easy to just like let nostalgia convince you that it's like the best game ever created. Just like Final Fantasy VII isn't the best game ever created by any stretch of the imagination at all. Um, but I still think it's a great Zelda game to a certain extent. I think there are some things that are like missing from it, you know, and that's like the like Zelda and the villain like play no role in that game to a certain extent. other than like at the beginning and near the end, um, you never get to see, is like one thing about it. So a lot of the time you're just like, in the first half of the game, it's like, oh, you need to get through this thing, so you need the 3 rocks, and I'm like, okay. And then you never see Zelda again. Then in the second half of the game, it's like, well, Zelda's hiding. Here's Sheik, by the way, and Sheik is going to tell you what to do. You need to find these medallions and awaken the sages. And I'm like, okay. And I like the sages. The sages are more interesting than Zelda is, because they're like characters that you've met in the first half of the game, and that have links to the various areas in the game. But um, other than that, like, you never really get any connection to like, because you miss all of it. It just like goes like backwards in time to forwards in time, and then it's like the place is like in shit, and it's like, oh yeah, Ganon did it, or the bosses did it, but like you never really get the sense of what's actually happening or what's so bad. Like they'll say like, oh, Ganon's monster froze Zora's domain, and they'll say like, oh, like Ganon's monster wants to eat all the Gorons, and they're like, oh, that's pretty shit. The problem is that like you never see the some stuff then like comes out of nowhere, like the monster attacking Kakariko village in one of like the greatest cutscenes in the game, but it just kind of comes out of nowhere. Or like in Kokiri village, it's like, oh, there's monsters there now, and all of the Kokiri are somewhere, but like you never get to see it like rectified. Like you go ahead, like they're like, oh, this thing is shit, so you need to go to the dungeon, and also you need to awaken the sage, and then you do it, but there's no kind of like positive effect afterwards. Like Zora's domain is still frozen over, and where are the Zoras? And like Kokiri Forest is still full of monsters, and where are the Kokiri? It's like, I don't like that about the game. I think it's like, well, it's not that hard. You just revert back to the way that the places were after you do this certain point of the game. So that's like stuff about Ocarina of Time where I'm kind of like, yeah, whatever, you know. What I do like, there are other things that I do love about it. Like, obviously, it's very good at being like a 3D game when it was the first 3D Zelda game, right? Now, not every game successfully made that transition. But Zelda Ocarina of Time does so really well. They even play with that a lot in the dungeons, where they really kind of bring the 3D aspect of things into how the dungeon works. Like they do that with the forest temple, in a really memorable sort of way, and with the fire temple as well. It's just really good. So there's a lot to love about Ocarina of Time. I just don't. I think Twilight Princess is better. As a 3D Zelda game, it's just better on all fronts. Majora's Mask and Breath of the Wild. So there's like the modern darling, and there's like the cult classic or the cult favorite. Um, Breath of the Wild, I'm going to push into great. I'm not pushing it into Pipit tier. I think there are things about this game that are like swings and misses, or they're not even swings, like they didn't bother even swinging. I think those things, almost like in Frozen from the other tier list, I think those things are easy to ignore, because the because everything else about this game is so sublime. Like playing Breath of the Wild gave me a feeling and an experience that I had not had for a long time playing any video game. And that's, I really, really mean that. Like, I remember loving it so much when I played it, but again, we're trying to take that out of the equation. We're trying to be objective here, right? And that's the thing. You kind of have to, like, the world is beautiful in this game. I love that it's just open. You get to do what you want, when you want, as much as you want, as little as you want. If you want to do 5,000 side quests, you can do all 5,000 side quests. If you want to do 4, you can do 4. If you want to do it in this order, you can do it in this order. If you want to do a million things before even doing the first dungeon, you can do that, and then you can do the first dungeon. Which one is the first one? You decide, you know? Like, I love that element of it. I think the music is beautiful in it. I think it feels really fun to play. I think there's enough challenge in it that it never feels necessarily easy. I really enjoy that it um, allows you a certain amount of creativity in how you tackle situations. Do you want to be a stealthy person who just tries to avoid combat? Do you want to be a person who engages in combat? Do you want to be a person who tries to utilize the environment to your advantage? All three of them are are legitimate and relevant, um, and all three of them are legitimate and relevant, and whichever one works for you works for you. And I love all of those things about this game. I love the characters in this game. I love the way that the story is presented. I like that you start at the end and slowly piece together the past. I think is a great thing, and it's well executed. Right, all of those things are amazing, but at its core, there are some elements where I'm like, why did you not like show the same due diligence to this? And they almost stick out more for the fact that the rest of the game is so superb. And what I mean is that, like, for me, when I played the game the first time, right, I think this is the best way to explain it. The first like quadrant of the game that I did was Zora's Domain. And Zora's Domain, in terms of the Zora characters, their place in the story, how they interact with Link, how they're like threatened by the divine beast, how it's like perpetually raining in their province because of this thing, how they're under threat from it. You have like the whole complex relationship between like Link and the Zora because of like what happened with Mipha, and they'll never forgive him, but Sidon does. Even though he has more reason than anybody to hate Link, he forgives him and just wants to get on with it. And then you fix everything and you come back, and everything's good again, and you see that sort of redemption happen to a certain extent. I expected that every like one of the 4 would be as good as that, and they're not. Because then you go to, let's say, for example, the Goron one, and like, yeah, it's like dropping lava rocks or something, but I'm like, the Gorons are used to that anyway. They eat them. That sounds like a little bit petty, but and then you have Yunobu, who I'm like is very forgettable to a certain extent. Like, he's like, oh, now I'm not a coward anymore, and then you never really care about him ever again. To a certain extent, it's just not as memorable. You have like the Risho one where the bird isn't doing anything; it just flies in the sky, and then the guy is like, "Oh yeah, it won't go away," and we send people up there and it shoots them, and I'm like, "Yeah, but it's not doing anything, is it? So just leave it alone. And if you leave it alone, then it'll leave you alone or something." So it's like it doesn't do anything. And then like, who's the hero? Just some guy, he's just some like busted ass Risho who feels sorry for himself, and I'm like, I don't care about him. Teba or whatever, Teba, something like that. Like, I don't care about him. Like, there's nothing interesting about the character, and so how can I be invested in him to a certain extent? So there's nothing, like, that's just a complete wash. Then the the then like the Gerudo one is probably the only one who approaches being engaging on the same level as the Zora one, because you have the stuff with the Yiga clan, which is just fun. And the princess is quite a cool character. Like, the young leader of the Gerudo is actually quite fun as a character. She's cool. So that's actually quite exciting. But like, when you play the Zora's Domain one, you're like, oh my god, if the rest is like this, then I'm going to like wet myself. and then it's just not. It's just like the story quadrants are like a letdown after the Zora one. And then there are like the dungeons themselves, which I find like are the most boring part of the game. They're like the dungeons are like a pivotal element of any Zelda game, right? And the dungeons in Twilight Princess are better. The dungeons in Link's Awakening are better. The dungeons like in Wind Waker, Oracle of Ages, Minish Cap, Zelda 1, Ocarina of Time are better than the dungeons of in Breath of the Wild. Like, all of the dungeons look the same when you're inside in them. They all follow the same principle that you move the stuff around and then you use that to reach the new areas in the dungeon. And even like for all intents and purposes, each of the bosses is quite similar to a certain extent. They play differently and obviously the strategies are different, but they look the same and they act the same, and I'm kind of like, all right, it's another one of these. And there's only four of them. Whereas a game like Majora's Mask, which also ostensibly only has four main dungeons, each of them is completely different. Each of them has a completely different atmosphere. Each of them has a completely different way to play it. Each of them has a different boss, mini bosses, everything. It's just all very varied. So I feel like. And then, like, the final dungeon is really great. I love Hyrule Castle, but like the final boss is boring. Like the final boss is like a very big letdown in Breath of the Wild. So again, I feel like Breath of the Wild is almost like the core is like the core. Some of the core elements just don't have the same due diligence um given to them as like the rest of the game. And I find that disappointing to a certain extent. I still think Breath of the Wild is one of the best games of all time. I think like it definitely is. It and Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker, like three amazing 3D Zelda games, they deserve to be there. Three two-dimensional Zelda games, The Legend of Zelda, Minish Cap, and Oracle of Ages, they're all in great tier. But I think Breath of the Wild, you need to have like a balanced critique of it. It's very easy just to, because like 90% of the game is exploration, it's very easy to ignore that other 10%, which is actually quite critical, or quite important. So that's kind of where I am on Zelda Breath of the Wild. Majora's Mask, I'm going to put it in Pipit tier as well. Again, I'm being objective, and as far as this is concerned, if I was being subjective, it'd still be extremely high. But Majora's Mask, I think in terms of it as a game, it's very courageous in the way it is. There is no other Zelda game that is like this. You know, um, there's no other Zelda game that feels like Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask, like Link's Awakening, has this completely strange, otherworldly atmosphere, where even though you feel like you're in the same world as Ocarina of Time, it's very obvious that you're not. The characters look the same. The world, it looks the same. You could be in Hyrule, but you're not. You're in Termina. Everything has this strange layer of otherworldliness attached to it, and you constantly feel almost like in Link's Awakening, like you're just part of something and you're not in control. And there's something like very humbling about that. At the same time, what I love about Majora's Mask is exactly what you don't see in Ocarina of Time, where in Majora's Mask, it's all about the effect that is being wrought upon the world by this crap that's going on. Um, and you actually do get to see the benefits of having solved problems. They get reset again, regrettably, because you're constantly going backwards and forwards through time, but you constantly feel like you're having an impact on things, or you're actually doing things or changing things, or that the actions that you take have positive consequences. And I think that that's really cool. You know, you don't get to see that in a lot of Zelda games, unfortunately. But you do in Majora's Mask. I'm just gonna take a drink. So like then like there's the dungeons, which are also extremely important. All of the four key dungeons are challenging in their own way. If you want to get all of the stray fairies, are challenging. They make you think. They have a good balance of puzzles and of combat. They have a really unique atmosphere. Like, you don't just have like, oh, it's the ice one, oh, it's the fire one, oh, it's the forest one. You have like the strange sort of dark, scary, like tiki voodoo one, jungle swamp one. You have like, oh, the weird fire and ice mountain one that just feels odd. You have the weird mechanical factory water dungeon, and you have like the like imposing sort of temple sort of Aztec style almost kind of dungeon then as well. It's just really really cool. You have like all of the various side quests as much as you want to do. You know, as many side quests as you'd like to do, you can do them. You can take things at your own pace. You can do if you want, you can just do the four dungeons one after the other. If you want, you can spread them out as much as you want. Um, and you also just have this, as I say, like there's a lot that I feel is like similar about like Majora's Mask to Link's Awakening. Like there's this layer of the story on top of it where like you're constantly hearing about like the you're constantly reminded about like Skull Kid, you know, and the sort of bits and pieces of crap that he's after doing, and then you finally get to the like you finally get to the end, and you finally like you're learning that he's not actually a bad guy. It's like this like corrupting evil force that nobody could be immune to is what's behind it all, which is like the mask itself, Majora's Mask, which is obscenely powerful. Like, I think there's like a lot that's very interesting about that in terms of Skull Kid being a villain to a certain extent. So I don't know. Like I definitely think it's so well executed. Like everything about it, about Majora's Mask, is so tight and so well put together. Like I don't know what I would change about it. I think if you changed anything about it, you would spoil all of the things that make it great. You know, that's what I'd say about it. It's just so unique. There's no other Zelda game that feels like it. It's fun to play. It's extremely enjoyable. It's also like challenging. Like there's enough of there's a certain degree of challenge about Majora's Mask which I enjoy. Um, I don't know like what else I can say about it. It's just great. So I think it definitely deserves to be in Pippet tier. So this is the this is the tier list for main series Zelda games. And yeah, do you agree, disagree? Were there any where you're kind of like, that's bullshit? Were there any where you're like, yes, somebody, I feel seen? Where are you kind of at with this one? I'll have to like download it as well. The last time when when I pressed that button, it didn't do anything. Oh, now it is. Download image. I feel like anyone who's played the Oracle games um needs to would appreciates them. The only people who don't appreciate them have never played them. Like, and I honestly say that. I don't mean that as a joke. That's definitely the way I feel. I'm going to like, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to like reorganize things a little bit. Can I like remove things? Can I like take stuff out again? I can reset. Okay. I'm going to like very, very quickly like flash fry this into a into like a subjective like favorites tier list. Favorite. And then never played. Don't really like. Where's the apostrophe? Don't. What? Really like. Favorite. Add to dictionary. Great. It's okay. I like it a lot. Hey, I think you're really cool. I like you a lot. Maybe we can hang out or something. So, Triforce Heroes goes into never played, and this one goes into never played. Like, Majora's Mask is going to go into favorite tier along with Wind Waker. Oracle of Seasons is going to go into I like it a lot. And Oracle of Ages is going to go into it's okay in my subjective sense. Skyward Sword is going to go into I don't really like. Phantom Hourglass I'm going to push into I like it a lot. And Spirit Tracks I'm going to push into it's okay. Like, I actually genuinely prefer playing Phantom Hourglass to Spirit Tracks. I think it holds like more of a nostalgic place to me for me in my life. The Link Zelda 2 I'm going to push into it's okay. Minish Cap I'm going to push into favorite tier. Twilight Princess I'm going to push into, this is the hard one, favorite or I like it a lot. I'm going to put it into I like it a lot. Link Between Worlds I'm going to push into it's okay. Or will I put it into, yeah, it goes into it's okay. Along with Link to the Past. Breath of the Wild I'm going to push into favorite tier. Four Swords Adventures I'm going to put into I don't really like because of the stupid cables, that situation. Link's Awakening I'm going to push into I like it a lot tier or favorite tier. I'm going to put it into, I'll put it into favorite. Ocarina of Time goes into I like it a lot, and Zelda 1 goes into it's okay. And it's when I say like it's okay, I'm gonna change this actually to I like, because it's okay isn't like accurate to in terms of like what that means, you know. So yeah, that's it. Like the subjective Zelda tier list from Majora's Mask all the way down to Skyward Sword, right? So, so yeah, I'm glad that I finally did this. It feels really good to have done it. I appreciate the viewership. I think I'm going to call it an evening for now, because I have the early shift tomorrow. I'm working, so I need to get to bed and I need to get up in the morning. So, thank you for watching, and for coming and hanging out tonight. I'm just going to save and download this one as well. Download image.